Question here, why don't you take the bus? Hey, how you doing? Welcome. This is the second episode of my show, What's Happening Here. I'm your host, Tosan. Last episode, in episode 1, we discussed car dependency. Now in this episode, we're going to discuss transit and why it kind of sucks here in North America. Before we even answer that question, I want to make one thing very, very clear. Transit is very hard. You have to get a city's worth of people where they want, when they want. These are people whose communities, livelihoods largely depend on your ability to get them there on time. And when things are going a little smoothly, you don't hear anything. But if one thing goes wrong, that's all you hear. You have minimal downtime. You have to do 12 to 16 hours a day. There's weather, there's other disruptions, detours. Transit has to be ever present and constantly functioning so a city can move and chug along. Transit is hard, but there are cities and all places in the world, even within North America, that have seemed to figure out transit a little better than the rest of North America.
This is all new to me because I'm not in the transit space.
Yeah, for sure. So, actually, the word trouble is not opening, but clearly they're open. It's for eating. So in the winter, people can wait inside when they're waiting for like buses and stuff. Which, if you're waiting for a bus, is very helpful. I'm actually so excited. It's my first time going on the street. If you look at New York, or Toronto, or Montreal, or Vancouver, or Chicago, are these perfect cities when it comes to transit? No, they all have their own issues and problems, but they're definitely seen as a more viable option. People see them as a means of actually getting around their city. People aren't bus people. Most people aren't car people. Most people aren't bike people. People just want to get around. They want to get around the most convenient and most efficient way of getting around. And if you live in Edmonton right now, it's the car. And we're actually going to use it as a case study for this whole season. So if all the examples we're going to be using are from Edmonton, but again, if you live in North America, a lot of these problems and issues we have here is going to look real familiar to you. So what are the problems that transit's facing in Edmonton that's making it so difficult for them to deliver the quality of service that people expect, that people want? Let's start with road design. Yes, I know. We're going to make this part quicker, I hope, but that's the reason why we talked about roads first, because it does impact the way we move around our city. How our roads are currently designed make it a less efficient way of getting around. Don't believe me? Listen to my friend Ben here.
Ben, I'm a transit planner with the city of Edmonton. If you think about the city of like this like middle kind of mature ring and then like another ring and then outside the Henday, it's that middle ring that's really tricky. And that's where like the densities are really low. The land uses are really segregated, you know, like the not a lot of mixed use. The road networks are like spaghetti, like it just kind of like noodles or whatever. They just kind of go like that. There's not like straight roads with like, you know, good grid intersections. Walkability is usually really terrible. You've kind of got like an arterial road with like a crumbling sidewalk, and it's just like, okay, grandma, like go stand and wait for your bus. You know, what could possibly go wrong? You know, so those areas are kind of tricky to serve. So a lot of it is to do with the built form of the city. I'm not just making excuses for transit, but a lot of it is to do with the built form of the city.
Like Ben kind of referenced, land uses are separate, meaning that people have to go from A to B to C to D, all spread out. And the more cities spread out, the harder it is for transit to service them. Coverage. Coverage is an important part of transit. How well the transit system, the bus or the train, gets to all parts of the city. Roads are designed the way that they are in Edmonton. It makes it very difficult and very expensive to service all areas of the city. This is a real big challenge for transit because money that could be otherwise used to improving other parts of the transit system is solely focused on just servicing the ever-sprawling, ever-spreading out of the city. When people's destinations are far apart and the density in those neighborhoods are low, there's not enough people to support the transit line throughout the neighborhood, making it expensive and inefficient to getting people where they want. And because it's expensive to service these neighborhoods, you only get a bus once every hour or so, making it an impractical way of getting around, because if you miss that one bus, you have to wait at least another hour for the next one. which means that if you have an appointment, kiss the appointment goodbye. It makes sense why people don't take the bus and end up taking the car. It's a far more reliable way of getting around in most cases.
When people make transitioning from one thing to another, they feel like they do it like 100%, right? If I want to take a transit every single day, then it's pointless. It's like, no, you can go like once a week, twice a week, once a month. Like, that's still better than zero. And like slowly, you can do more and more and more, or maybe once or twice a week is good enough. I think that just replacing one car trip with a transit ride is already doing a lot better than zero, So, and I honestly think that the more and more people use transit, the better it improves, the more and more you'll end up using it. But for some routes in Edmonton, it just doesn't make sense to take transit.
Let's move on to our next topic, budgeting, finances. Transit, like a lot of social services, is chronically underfunded. And of course, you trying to deal with a really terrible road system, not enough money to deal with it, it's kind of like having your arm tied behind your back. It makes it very difficult for you to do your job when you don't have the resources. At least that's what I thought, I looked into it and I'm like, that makes sense. Transit underfunded. You can feel it when you take the bus, you take the train, it's dirty.
Yeah, that's exactly what you think it is. It's P.
It's crowded, the buses aren't frequent. You're like, these people need more money to operate this thing, clearly. So I took a look at the data and I realized that transit is the second most expensive thing that we pay for in a city. So is transit actually underfunded? Because there is a lack of service that is being seen. The city reported that they're almost 250,000 hours short of meeting their standards when it comes to transit in the city. Since 2014, the amount of revenue hours has been around 2 million, but the revenue hour per capita has actually gone down. What does that tell us? That tells us that the amount of money being allocated to transit is not keeping up with the amount of people joining the city. The city is growing. We projected to hit over 2 million past 2030. The amount of transit dollars per person is becoming less and less and less, which is affecting the quality of service and limiting the coverage and the frequency that we mentioned earlier. The amount of money that we're allocating to transit is just not keeping up with the population growth. The Edmonton Police Service actually solved this problem by making sure that their budget was tied to population growth. And actually, there are some councillors in the city advocating for the same thing with transit, because transit, like policing, is an essential service. Yes, it is one of the most expensive things that a city pays for, but it's also an investment. That's the way transit should be viewed as. It should be viewed as an investment rather than a subsidy for the poor.
If we want to build a city that is that sprawled out, and we feel we have a mandate to kind of serve and provide at least some kind of equitable service to all parts of the city, like unfortunately, like that's buses, that's drivers, that's mechanics, that's it's all that and just snowballs, right? Like, yeah, it's not just about like, okay, we need 20 more buses or whatever, like, okay, maybe you can find the funding for that, but all of our garages were full, so it's like, oh, we actually need also like a new facility to like keep the buses. It's like, oh right, yeah, they don't just like park them on the like sidewalk or whatever, like the road. So that was something a few years ago that was kind of like, oh, yeah, of course.
I'm about to say something. I'm about to do it. Transit shouldn't have to make money. We don't look at our roads or our sewer system or our legal system as a big waste of money. We all realize that these core essential services are the foundations of which our society runs. Transit is one of those things. Not yet in some cases, and for a lot of people, they can get around without transit, but with the rising fuel costs, the rising cost of vehicle ownership and insurance rates, transit is one of the only few affordable ways left of moving around the city, of mobility. And also, there's an implied return on investment. That's why the government invests in things like this, because private business otherwise wouldn't be able to, because they wouldn't see a return on their investment soon enough. That's why the government needs to step in to provide some services that the private sector simply can't or won't provide.
See how old this LRT looks? And it's still in use. I think this is like 40 years old. Like, transit, when it's kept well, actually ages really, really, really well. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Like, it's an investment for the long term, right? Like a car, a bus, even a bus has about a shelf life of like 10 to 15 years, but the LRT has a shelf life of close to 40.
Let's look at our return on investment. Transit financially contributes $19 billion to the Canadian economy. And these numbers are quite old, they're from 2018, so it possibly could be even more now. The transit industry directly employs over 60,000 people, and transit's capital investments adds an additional 65,000 jobs to the Canadian economy. Transit reduces vehicle operating costs for Canadians by about $12.6 billion annually. Transit reduces economic costs of traffic collisions by almost $3.2 billion annually. Transit reduces annual greenhouse gas emissions by 4.7 million tons, valued at $207 million. Transit saved about $137 million in annual healthcare costs related to respiratory illnesses. See, this is the other half of the equation. This is what transit gives communities, you know? Transit is a fantastic investment. There's another study done in the States that every dollar you put into transit, you get $5 back in economic stimulation. Does this mean that we should spend money in transit irresponsibly or illogically, or that no matter what transit project that you implement, you'll always bring back money? Of course not. You still need to be smart with how we spend our money when it comes to transit and making sure that we get the biggest bang for our buck. But I think the point I'm making is that we do get a very sizable bang for our buck when we invest in transit. These transit connects communities to each other. Transit connects centers of economic commerce to each other. Imagine if there was a bullet train between Edmonton and Calgary, and how often people would just want to pop down to Calgary to go, I don't know, for dinner or something. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, lots of people lose their jobs over not having a vehicle. Lots of people, just simply do not get economic opportunities just because they can't physically be able to transport themselves to the location of where they work, even though their job may not require them to drive. Transit alleviates these problems by bringing transportation to everybody, not just the wealthy.
My name is Boka Patsila. I'm a PhD candidate in urban planning at the University of Alberta, and mainly what I do is I research transportation. From the human perspective, generally transit in North America is perceived as like the transportation option of last resort. You especially in terms of reliance on it, there are so many employers that wouldn't give you a job if you don't have a driver's license and a reliable form of transportation, whatever that means. While if anything, for a low-income individual, good transit system might be more reliable, because if a bus breaks, another one comes in. If your car breaks and you don't have money to fix it, you're screwed, basically, right? But that notion, that idea that transit is so bad, unreliable, and cannot be trusted, is definitely out there.
The problem with transit being underfunded, like most social services, it's just all those benefits that I just mentioned that transit helps with, all that investment, all that stimulation to the economy, that doesn't happen when we don't invest in the transit. We have some really old LRT trains that I'm sure have been paid off tons of times over by now. Transit is a long-standing, robust investment that fundamentally changes and improves people's lives. And when it works gloriously. You step out your house and you can just go wherever, completely unencumbered by a vehicle. You don't have to worry about parking. You can stop off anywhere you want. Yes, there are some scenarios where owning a car just makes more sense. Absolutely. I'm not advocating for somebody who has to take their kids to hockey practice to take the bus everywhere they go. No. But I do think a large portion of our trips can be taken by transit. And often those transit trips, if transit was getting the funding that it deserved, can be a high quality experience. Because that's what we deserve. It's our tax dollars paying for these things, right? We don't have the best history with transit projects. The Valley Line that was just implemented, there was a ton of stories about how that did not go well. First they found a rock under the soil that was the size of a car. Then those cracked pillars. It was pushed back by 3 years. Yeah, there was lots of problem when it came to that Valley Line put in. But man, if you take it, you see the vision. It's a fantastic experience. You see beautiful sights as you head over the river valley. And yes, it was 3 years late. Yes, it was kind of a debacle, some may say, by the way it was constructed. But one thing that we know for sure is that this transit line is going to stay in the ground for at least another 40 years. And by then, all those things about how the project ended up going would be long forgotten. The same stations that were uncomfortable, that were underground, that had many blind spots, a lot of them were street level and were open, and you had great sight lines. It felt a lot safer. I think that oftentimes the people who don't take transit very much or don't see it stigmatize it. They think that only a certain class of people use it. That class typically being the impoverished. Well, that's not what we saw. We saw kids, families, all taking the opportunity to enjoy the city. But since COVID, I feel like we've all felt a little bit of that social anxiety and that lack of community. Loneliness is on the rise. I'm not saying that transit is going to solve that problem. Not at all. What I am saying, though, is that transit can alleviate it just a little bit. There is a nice, warm sense of community when you recognize your bus driver, or when you look over and you see a father with his children. It's that gentle social interaction that makes you feel a little bit closer to your city and to the people that are around you. We talked about the budget and we talked about road design. We can't really talk about transit in North America, and particularly Edmonton, without talking about the homelessness crisis that Edmonton and many cities in North America are currently facing. It does make people feel uncomfortable. It's made me feel uncomfortable for sometimes. I've seen people hallucinate off of I don't know what on the bus. I have been in very uncomfortable situations where people were going to medical emergencies and mental health challenges right in front of me. And look at me, I'm a grown man. Like if I feel uncomfortable, I can't imagine if somebody who was a little bit more vulnerable, how they would feel.
It's like a dark hallway down into here, and there used to be like a lot of people right here, and sometimes they like squeeze by them to get into here.
And this is not to say that homeless people are inherently unsafe or bad people or criminals. Obviously, they're not. Oftentimes, with poverty comes crime. And people who otherwise won't make a decision, put in certain circumstances, may feel forced to make a decision that they otherwise wouldn't make. We're all our best selves when our mental health is suffering. And wouldn't your mental health suffer really, really badly if you didn't have a place to stay? And I think there's a balance to be had here. Only you know your level of safety, what feels safe for you. But I do think there's something important to be said about not shying away from people in your community. You shouldn't feel uncomfortable. You should, in a way, because that inspires you and promotes you to have other people's suffering and other people's hurt in the community at the forefront of your mind, so we can advocate to our leaders to make changes within our system, put our tax dollars in the right places to make sure these people have homes.
It's not the transit agency's goal. It's our societal goal to make sure that people who were less fortunate receive the help and assistance that they need. Transit should not be concerned about housing people. The transit agency's budget is already constrained enough as it is, and that's part of the problem as well.
The bus isn't a place to house people. It isn't a safe injection site. Transit is how people, children, adults get around, and people need to feel safe in the way they get around. And due to the complete collapse of our social services, we're now seeing the ramifications for that in our transit centers. I think it's important that these people have homes and places to stay, and these people aren't just being shuttled to another part of the city or just put out of sight. And I'm worried that that's actually going to be the case. Counselors heard in a report, according to Edmonton police data, incidences of nonviolent crime in the transit system fell 36% from August to September of 2022, while the number of violent incidences fell a reported 47%.
This is actually really encouraging because anecdotally from 6 months ago, this station was made me feel way more uncomfortable. Honestly, I can't say that it just feels significantly better. So things are getting better, things are improving. And it's really a matter of like actually going to experience it for yourself. So like this is close to Chinatown, a neighborhood that's facing a lot of like social problems. A lot of the most acute problems in the city are faced in Chinatown. But it's important to not neglect those communities, and things like these stations like these in these areas are what bring these communities up in connection with the rest of the city.
Okay. Let's get right. So we clearly film at different times. I want you to imagine a dream transit system right now. I know we've all done this since we were a child. We've thought about our perfect transit system, but I want you to take the time to think about it. Picture that, the train always comes on time. Picture that is rather affordable, only a couple bucks to get to wherever you want to get within the city. It's convenient. It rides frequently. Let's just imagine that it even makes money. How about that? That this transit system is one that actually economically gives back to the city that it serves. That place actually exists. If you're in Canada or America, the likelihood that you've even been exposed to a good transit system on a regular basis is pretty much zero. Since we're not exposed to high quality transit very often, it limits our ability to advocate for good public transit because we don't even know what that looks like. So we're going to take a look at one of the best public transportation systems in the world, the MTR, based in Hong Kong. Fares can range from about 70 cents to 10 Canadian dollars, which is a bargain if you ask me. And these fares cover 170% of the operating costs of the public transit system. So pretty much those little fares cover so much of the operating budget. How is Hong Kong even doing this? If you're looking at the MTR and all you see are subway cars and railway lines, you're kind of missing the bigger picture here. You see, property is a huge part of the equation. If you're a business or a storefront, you likely rely on foot traffic to make sure that you feed yourself at the end of the day due to the serendipity of people passing your store. What's more reliable than a transportation line directly adjacent to your store, meaning that you will have a forever reliable amount of foot traffic passing your store every single day? I'm sure you'd be willing to pay top dollar for a piece of land like that. And that's what the MTR realized as well. See, they had the Railway Plus Properties Initiative, meaning that the land adjacent to the stations were actually owned by the transit agency. They leased out this land to many businesses, many of them being multinational corporations willing to pay top dollar to have access to the transit riders that frequently use the system. Now, the laws are different in Hong Kong, and they're currently facing a housing crisis. I'm not saying that we should take every single thing from Hong Kong and apply it here in Edmonton. I am saying that there is just a lot that we can learn from them. So that whole system is basically described as transit-oriented development, or TOD. It's exactly what it sounds like. Land development centered around transit. Just like the business owner that I mentioned before, businesses are willing to pay top dollar and pay higher taxes to have access to transportation customers because it brings them higher revenue. It also promotes more smaller and local business. And of course, you get all the other benefits with public transportation, like, reduced car traffic, reduced air pollution, safer neighborhoods. And if it's done appropriately, it actually can lead to a reduction in housing costs in the long run. I want you to take a look at this. This is a subway station based in Chongqing, China. This station looks like it goes to the middle of nowhere. And it did. You couldn't even drive directly to the station. You had to walk through the bush a little bit to get to that station. And it was kind of made a mockery of by many Western outlets. It looks at the station as an example of China overbuilding their infrastructure and not being prudent with their money. Well, if you look at it now, it's a hustling and bustling metropolis. We have our own version of this here. If we look at this, we went to Blatchford.
That's the tower for the old airport. So this whole neighborhood is being built around transit. This whole neighborhood. That's like it's really cool. It's actually really fire because this is how you should be doing it. You build the transit first, and then you build everything else around it. So yeah, it looks like there's nothing here now, but there's plans to make this something really, really cool. Oh my gosh, I haven't been here before, so we're gonna go. You can see the seeds of a new community. We got a bike path there, and then and look at that, slick. Downtown is right there. This is so yeah. Transit isn't perfect in Edmonton at all, not in the slightest, but they're heading in the right direction. And so stuff like this shows you that. Before, there were bus stops and stuff being built after the fact. This is how you do it. You build it first, and then you build everything else around it. And so you can really see how this community is going to be something really, really special in the next few years, for sure.
Right now, in this present day, we're in a privileged enough position where we can choose what our green future looks like. If we don't take this mentality and we don't become more resourceful with the land and resources that we currently have, we're going to have to make a choice regardless. And that choice likely won't be a very good one, and the option will be far more limited. And you know what's really great about this? Is that this seems to be the direction that Edmonton is heading in. TOD is one of the main things outlined within this document, the city plan. So in our current predicament, and even in the past, transit in Edmonton hasn't had much to look forward to when it comes to quality of service and safety. But hopefully, I kind of outlined here there is a silver lining. Looking forward, there are many things that are being done to alleviate the current problems with transit, and also creating new positive benefits from transit within the city. Making sure that every dollar that goes in, that $5 comes back out and helps out the community. I love transit. I'm a transit nerd. This is what I love to talk about. But you shouldn't have to be a transit person to take transit. You're just trying to get from A to B. And the most convenient option should be the option that is the best for our health and for the environment. The really exciting thing is that here in Edmonton, we're taking transit-oriented development seriously. Millwoods Town Centre, Blatchford, Century Park. These are all transit-oriented neighborhoods that are currently in development or will be developed in the future. This is a very positive thing. It's a very exciting thing that transit is no longer looked at as just as a subsidy.
Things like these, stations like these in these areas are what bring these communities up in connection with the rest of the city. So it's just, I don't know, it's just like this. I don't tell us what's both sides of the thing. I just can't think of a negative of, like, other than the initial cost and investment of transit. When it's deployed right correctly, it brings up neighborhoods that need help. It increases connectivity, increases economic activity, you know, like by giving people access to jobs and things. It makes people healthier as they're walking on the stops. Like, this is, like, this, I literally cannot think of a downside. So tell us, if you can think of one, let me know. But, like,